Hi, it's Tuesday, May 23rd, and I continue to read and wonder my way through Luke's Gospel. And it is right now, well, not that bright, but very early, which coincidentally is the way that people used to describe me. Yeah, he's not that bright, but he is awfully early. That's good. Anyway, today it's Luke 20, verses 41 to 47. And yesterday, Jesus was questioned by some Sadducees about the resurrection, and he answered in such a way that the scribes approved. So you see, the scribes and Pharisees generally believed in resurrection. Sadducees did not. That was sort of a definite dividing line between the two of them. Both had a lot of influence. They were religious leaders in the community, but not in agreement on resurrection. It all seems part of what has been basically a question and answer time with Jesus. Now, whether that is an actual event where Jesus sat down and had all these questions and answered them all, or whether Luke has created it by taking different stories of Jesus when he answered this question and once he answered that question, and then fashion that together into this conversation, is debatable. For me, the latter is the more likely of the two, as opposed to the former. Which is to say, I think that Luke has created this out of sayings of Jesus, out of different stories of Jesus, put them all together, and for me has created an antagonism that maybe isn't really there. Or wasn't there at the height, the way it is. I mean, it's very antagonistic, it would seem, because Luke keeps commenting that they were trying to trick Jesus, and he saw that they were trying to fool him, and but we don't know any of those things. We just know the questions and answers. And so, as I've been wondering through it, I've been wondering mostly about the sort of the actual question and answer, as opposed to the commentary provided by Luke in his context, the way he's put the context together. Anyway, that's just me talking right now. We're going to continue with this question and answer period and see what happens. So here it is. It's Luke 20, verses 41 to 47. Then Jesus said to them, "How can they say that the Messiah is David's son? For David himself says in the book of Psalms, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool.' David thus calls him Lord. So how can he be his son?" In the hearing of all the people, he said to the disciples, "Beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes and love to be greeted with respect in marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." So here are two things that, again, when you think about it, are sort of hard to imagine happened all at the same time, right? On one, Jesus is answering a question of the crowd, the Sadducees, the scribes, whoever, and then next he's talking to his disciples, although people get to overhear it. But it's very personal. It's to the disciples, the ones who are, to whom he is a teacher. But the others get to hear it. Like it's a just think about what that event would look like, how that would work. If you put it on stage, it would seem peculiar, never mind actually happening. That's why, for me, it feels very much like a construct by Luke. But I think the content... so, for instance, Jesus apparently here answers a question that we didn't hear asked. Right? When Jesus says to them, "How can they say that the Messiah is David's son?" That hasn't been prefaced with, and somebody said, "Are you a son of David? Are you the Messiah? Is the Messiah the son of David?" Didn't say any of that. He just comes out and says, "So how can they say that Messiah is David's son? For David himself said in the book of Psalms, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool.' David calls him Lord. So how can he be his son?" So there are some questions about the Messiah. And there is an expectation that the Messiah will come and redeem them, and that the Messiah will be the next David, and therefore will restore Israel, will restore Jerusalem, will basically help us be rid of the Roman Empire, and we will once again be who we were. Even though none of them, their living would remember who they were, how they were, but there is a memory of the times of David, and that kind of thing. So there's the promise of going back to that golden age. And Jesus is saying, yes, but no. You're awaiting Messiah, and maybe Jesus saying, yeah, that's me. And in fact, he could say, yeah, sure, that's me. And by the way, I am David's son, right? We can trace Jesus' family back to David through Joseph, and peculiarly through Mary too. But mostly we can do it through Joseph. So he fits the bill. Jesus could just say, yeah, the Messiah is the son of David. So am I. I'm a descendant of David. And interestingly enough, for me, as I wonder about this, that would end the discussion. I mean, someone else would say, well, that's not enough, and then we can go on, but that hasn't happened. But Jesus realizes that that's an inadequate answer and lets them continue without full knowledge or understanding. Now, weirdly enough, full knowledge and understanding is going to invite you into a mystery that's hard to wrap your head around. Because, well, I'll recall that in Revelation, it is noted that Jesus is both the root of David and the descendant of David. So that Jesus wraps around, right? Because Jesus has always been being one with God, and that Jesus is born a descendant of David, so is both those things. So that's a mystery to get your head around. But Jesus doesn't avoid the mystery and doesn't let them simply carry on with incomplete knowledge, even though it would make things easier. See, that's the wonder for me. That's the piece for me going, so how often am I prepared to just go the path of least resistance? Even knowing you don't fully understand, it's just easier. I know you don't get it. So rather than try to explain all of it to you or explain myself fully to you, you've made an assumption about something, and that assumption is convenient, so I'm just going to carry on with it. When I do that, I am focused on myself. Right? If there's a project and I'm trying to get some people on board and they don't completely understand it, but they sort of make an assumption, oh, so this is just so that we can make sure that this thing happens. Well, no, it's actually much more than that. So an example that might be, well, it's relevant to me. My congregation, my community have recently amalgamated, which means another community has come to be part of us. A smaller community in terms of numbers, but with them comes this music school, a wonderful school that they have nurtured and built over a decade, and I think with us has potential to grow even bigger. So we have this school that's part of the amalgamation, and we are making preparations to really support and make that school happen. And the people who go, oh, okay, so we're going to have a school, so that's cool. So you want to teach kids music, and then there'll be an income from that. So that'll be like a self-sustaining thing. Now I could just go like, yeah, that's what it is, absolutely, because they think that's a good idea, and then we don't have to talk about it any longer. They're not going to be necessarily all that involved in school. They just need a place to slot it in their heads that they are comfortable with and saying, oh, okay, so it's kind of a revenue generator, actually, and a perpetual one. So that's, oh, good. Okay, I get it. The thing is, music school is not a revenue generator. It's not meant to be a revenue generator. Any revenue it generates will be put back into the program. It is, in fact, a ministry. So now I have to spend some time with people talking about a ministry and what a ministry means and why we think it's a ministry. And I mean, in short, we think it's a ministry because many of us believe that music education, access to music education, is good for people, good for young people, good for old people. It's good for integrating emotions and feelings, good for helping us resolve things. It's a place to put anxiety and anger and creatively work it through. It's a way to learn to express ourselves. It's something to do that involves our minds and our bodies. I just think it's something of massive value to a great number of people in the community, if not everybody in the community. And I believe it is important for a church or any kind of faith community to be of value to the community. That is, to be relevant. My question has always been, why would the neighborhood care that we're here? Unless they're Christians. So if they come to church on Sundays, I get that, okay? But what about the people who don't come to church? Why would we matter to those who don't come to church or are not Christian? Why would we matter to our Muslim neighbors? Why would we matter to our atheist neighbors? Why would we matter to those people? Well, as we are able to help them without trying to convert them or get them on the salvation boat, we just want to be good neighbors. We want to bring something of value to the community. That's an important ministry. And I think that's really important for churches to do that. Any kind of faith community. We'll talk about things like outreach. I talk about that as being relevance to the community. How are you relevant to the community? Yes, you are relevant to the faithful, and you're there for those who want to engage with God and with Spirit in a way that is akin to your expression of faith. You're there for absolutely, but what have you got for everybody else? What have you got for the others? And so to me, that's what this beautiful school is. And the more I talk about that, then that raises more questions. And then we start, well, are we doing enough outreach? Could we do well? Wouldn't feeding the hungry be more important than teaching kids music? And now we get into a whole discussion which might be fruitful and valuable, but it might delay me getting the school up and running. Not that I'm the person responsible for the school up and running. I'm just using it as an example of where it's tempting to let people go with the simple explanation they've got in their heads, and forego the longer, deeper explanation. So if I just let people, so it'll be self-sustaining. It's the financial things because they'll get paid. So that's great. Okay, I can let that go, and I get my result efficiently. Means they're on side. They're voting for it. They think it's a good idea. Fine, no problem. We're done. Great, Norm. And they'll let me and the others who care about this get the job done. However, when we stop to take the time to talk about it, to pull it apart, to talk about ministry and relevance and what it means to be a faith community, and what it means to be a faith community in a diverse, larger community. When we get all those discussions, what can happen? No guarantee of it, but some of those people who said, "Yeah, fine, go ahead, do it. It's a great idea." Those people will move from approving it and putting it on a shelf to actually getting involved, and then wondering about some of those bigger questions too, about how are we relevant to our neighbors, and what is it that we do that matters, and so we as a community grow faithfully, and we bring together more of our gifts, and we create something together with God. We involve more people, but it takes longer. What I see Jesus doing here is exactly that. I think you just say, "Well, I'm a descendant of David, so yes, you can call me Messiah. If that's your expectation." But he doesn't. He stops to explain, "Okay, so wait a minute. Sure, yes, I am, and yet I'm not, because we need to talk about what and who the Messiah is." So the question was never. Luke doesn't record a question being asked, but Jesus is answering it anyway. And I find that interesting. The second part, in the hearing of all the peoples, he said to the disciples, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes. Again, love to be greeted with respect. They get the best seats. They devour widows' houses for the sake of appearance. Say long prayers. Theirs will be the greater condemnation." So when I heard this as a kid, when I read this as an adult, I hear in this Jesus condemning the scribes. Right? That's how it works, and everybody knows that. I've heard it preached that way. I've heard it pointed out that way. That we are that Jesus does not like the scribes. But you've heard me harp on this again and again and again and again. That there are some scribes who are very good and some Pharisees who are very good people, and they're trying their best. And frankly, the way they're questioning Jesus, it's their job, and they're doing it faithfully. They could, because they don't. Yes, we hear again and again in the gospel that they are afraid of the crowd. I totally get that. But they could just condemn Jesus without questioning him. I mean, ultimately they are going to, right? They're going to question him in a bizarre kangaroo court where the answers don't really matter. They could have just jumped to that, but they don't. They're questioning Jesus. I think that they are doing their due diligence. They are investigating. Yes, they may be gauging how the crowd responds, but they're also learning from themselves. They want to know these things. And there are earnest scribes and earnest Pharisees. And they are those ones who do become Christian, who follow Jesus and follow the way. And they are there. And they are, so it really bothers me when we say, well, beware the scribes, because all those scribes, they like to walk around in long robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. And they're just basically horrible people. So change the punctuation slightly. Yeah, it's not hard to do. And it works in the Greek just as easily as it works in the English. Beware the scribes who like to walk around in long robes. Not beware the scribes, all of whom like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the best seats in the synagogues and best in the places of honor and banquets. No. Beware of those scribes who insist on being greeted with respect, and they love to wear the long robes, and they have to have the best seats, and they have the place of honor, the banquets. Beware of those ones. Beware of those ones, because you know what? They are the ones who devour widows' houses. And yeah, they say the long prayers, but they just do that so they look good. There's no connection in it. You know that. And by the way, they will receive greater condemnation. So it's not, for me, it's not a condemnation of all scribes. It's the ones who care more about how they are greeted and how they are respected in the community, the more who care about their place in the community. Because the thing is, they are meant to be concerned about widows and orphans. They are meant to be concerned about those who do not have support. That's their calling. Right, and as long as they are feathering their own nests, as long as they are focused on themselves, then they aren't doing their job, and so they are devouring widows' houses. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are out bilking widows. It just means that they're not doing their primary job, which is to take care of people who are in need. They are meeting their needs and not the needs of the community. That's what God called them to. So that's why theirs is the greater condemnation. It's not that scribes and Pharisees are going to be more condemned than anybody else. It's that the religious leaders, scribes and Pharisees, who are more concerned about themselves than about the people that they serve, yes, God is going to be very disappointed in them. And they will receive the greater condemnation. Now, that could be speaking of some kind of divine punishment. Absolutely. Could also be the reality. Lesson I tried to teach my kids as they were growing up. Something I am aware of for myself. When we are all about ourselves, when we are not just self-reliant, but just selfish, self-focused, what happens is when we come to something that we don't know how to handle, we don't really have any friends to help us. We've been of no value to our neighbors, and our neighbors, it's not that they want to punish us necessarily. Sometimes, yes, they do want to punish us, so they're not going to help us. But it's also they don't know how to, because we've not created any kind of relationship. I mean, I know myself. You meet somebody who's all puffed up and all about themselves, and when they trip and fall, when something happens, there's a party that goes like, yeah, well, guess you should have seen that coming, eh, Steve? Because you've been such a jerk for so long. Instead of, oh my God, what's Steve going to do? This is hard for Steve. Now, I'd like to think that I moved through that selfish, embarrassing laugh moment to like, okay, Steve's a human being who's hurting now, and shift through it. But I won't lie, there was that moment of like, yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, karma's going to get you every time, isn't it? That's the reality, that we think that way. When we puff ourselves up, people around us, they take a secret delight when that balloon is burst. And that's a reality. They will receive the greater condemnation. So whether we're talking about something like divine retribution or just talking about just the reality of the way things are, there's truth in these words. And it is a reminder for me. If I read this the wrong way, if I read this that, Jesus is talking about all scribes, all Pharisees, the message to me is still the same. The problem is, it also then underlies this idea that that everybody was out to get Jesus, which can turn it into a very bizarre kind of anti-Semitism. All the Jewish leaders wrote to get him. All the Jews wrote to get him. Therefore, all the Jews are responsible for Jesus' death. All of the Jews are our adversaries. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, beware the scribes who are like that. But well, by the way, beware. God, beware the ministers who are like that. Oh my God, beware of those Christians that puff themselves up and are absolutely convinced of their salvation, so much so that they don't even really care about you, other than maybe you're going to be a notch, on their scorecard if they manage to bring you over. No, you know what? Because those people, they don't care about you. They don't. They care about themselves and winning. We could say exactly the same thing that Jesus just said there. I'm not talking about all Christians or all ministers, all pastors, all priests. I'm not saying that at all. But the ones who are like that, yeah. It's one of the reasons that actually I am particularly harsh on colleagues who betray the trust of their community. Because very often people in the community come to associate us with God. Though they shouldn't, and we can try, but at an emotional level we do. If you come to sit with somebody to pray for the first time, and they hold your hand and you pray to God, it's easy to think that that person whose hand I'm holding, that person is my conduit to God. That person is God. And then when you betray them, they are disconnected, not just from you, but from God. And how dare you take that opportunity away? The number of people I meet who have been damaged by the church and therefore can't connect. It's too painful, it's too frightening for them, it's too much for them. I get very upset with the religious leaders who created that situation. Oh, well, you got to understand that Tammy's overreacting. And you know what? The minister who hurt her feelings, who disregarded her and put her in that situation, should have known better. That's your job. And so you have a higher level of responsibility than somebody who just lives down the street and may have hurt her feelings or insulted her faith. So to me, that's what Jesus is saying here. Scribes have a higher calling and therefore a greater responsibility. So yes, they are devouring widows' houses. And they may not be, defrauding them out of money, but the fact is they are taking from them because they're not doing their job. They're busy feathering their own nest, building their own reputation. Oh, okay, let's not have you go off on a rant there, okay? That also, though, does filter down to us, too, just as people of faith. When identified with the faith, people will very often, if you're the only Christian people know, or the only Christian people know well, they will naturally assume that you represent all Christians. So when you are kind, it's like, oh, Christians are so kind. And when you are not, you see, turns out Christians are all hypocrites. I don't think any of us need to be burdened with all the community, but the reality is people will read it that way, and we need to be aware of that from time to time. I think that's what I'm getting from this. At least that's my takeaway for the moment. You know what? I'm going to leave it with you today, and simply offer a prayer and see what happens with the rest of our day. So let us pray. Loving God, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to wonder, to consider the bigger picture, but also to look at the minutiae, hear the words. Thank you for the way that your word emerges, that your voice can be heard as we dare to wonder about Luke's gospel, about these stories of Jesus, about ourselves. God, as we hear your word, may we be drawn to your word. May we grow in faith. We pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, through the Holy Spirit. Amen. So that's enough for me today, but I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until I get to see you, God bless. Please know that God sees you and knows you and loves you exactly as you are, exactly how you are, and that God's love doesn't just come to you, but it moves through you into the world in amazing ways. You make a difference. So God bless you. See you tomorrow.